They told us Africa had no history, that it was a land of darkness, without books, without knowledge, without wisdom. But hidden deep in the sands of Mali, a city once flourished. A city that became a beacon of light when the rest of the world was still in shadow. This city was Timbuktu, and within its walls were treasures far greater than gold. Hundreds of thousands of manuscripts containing science, medicine, law, mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. In this film, you will discover the story of these manuscripts, how they were created, how they survived centuries of invasions and colonial lies, and why they are among the greatest treasures of human civilization. By the end, you will not only understand the true genius of Africa's past, but you will also see how this history is being resurrected today. Stay with me, because this story will change how you see Africa forever. For centuries, Africa was painted as a blank space on the map of human knowledge. European colonizers and their scholars claimed that Africans had no writing, no books, and no civilization. To them, Africa was a land of drums and oral tales, primitive and uncivilized. This myth became one of the greatest weapons of colonialism, a way to strip a people of their dignity by erasing their history. But the truth is far older and far richer. Across the continent, civilizations like Kemet, Nubia, Aksum, and Mali had produced written records for millennia. Yet the most astonishing evidence lay hidden in West Africa, in Timbuktu. Here, a vast intellectual tradition was thriving, with scholars debating philosophy, studying medicine, charting the stars, and recording laws long before Europe's so-called Age of Enlightenment. The manuscripts of Timbuktu shattered the colonial lie. They proved that Africa was not a silent continent, but a land where wisdom flowed like the Niger River. They revealed that Africa had not only preserved knowledge, but had advanced it, building universities and libraries that rivaled the greatest centers of learning in the world. In the 14th and 15th centuries, Timbuktu was not a myth or a faraway name. It was a living, breathing hub of scholarship. At its peak, the city drew scholars, poets, traders, and philosophers from across Africa and the Middle East. Caravan routes stretched across the Sahara, carrying salt, gold, ivory, and knowledge. Timbuktu became a crossroads where the desert met the river, where cultures converged, and where ideas blossomed. At the heart of this intellectual city were its universities and madrasas, the most famous being Sankore. These were not mere schools, but thriving centers of higher learning. Imagine halls filled with scholars reciting, debating, and copying books by hand, discussing astronomy, medicine, theology, and law. At its height, Sankore University had thousands of students, some traveling months across deserts just for a chance to study there. Knowledge was not a luxury in Timbuktu, it was a way of life. Families collected manuscripts as treasures, passing them down from generation to generation. The wealth of a man was not measured only in gold, but in the number of books he owned. In Timbuktu, knowledge was currency, wisdom was power, and manuscripts were the crown jewels of civilization. The manuscripts of Timbuktu covered subjects far beyond religion. They contained texts on mathematics, detailing advanced equations and geometric principles. They included treatises on medicine, explaining surgical techniques, diagnosing diseases, and prescribing herbal remedies still effective today. They offered works on astronomy, charting the movements of the stars and planets with precision that would astonish European astronomers centuries later. This was Africa's golden age of scholarship. These manuscripts revealed a society deeply engaged with the pursuit of truth and understanding. They showed a people who saw no contradiction between faith and science, who embraced both spiritual wisdom and empirical knowledge. In Timbuktu, philosophy and law, science and art all coexisted in harmony, weaving a fabric of knowledge that still amazes the world today. And it wasn't just a few elite scholars. This culture of learning was widespread. Students studied under great teachers, and teachers wrote commentaries that their students would copy and expand. The manuscripts were not static, they were alive, part of a continuous dialogue across generations. Every ink stroke was a declaration: Africa thinks, Africa writes, Africa creates. But no golden age lasts forever. By the 16th century, Timbuktu's wealth and reputation had drawn enemies. In 1591, Moroccan forces invaded, looting the city and seizing thousands of manuscripts. Many were carried away across the desert, scattered into distant collections. Others were burned, destroyed in the chaos of conquest. Timbuktu's great scholars were silenced, some exiled, others executed. The city that had once been the pride of Africa began to decline. Yet even as the invaders struck, the people of Timbuktu resisted in the only way they could: by hiding their manuscripts. Families buried books in the sand, sealed them in chests, and concealed them in mud-walled houses. They knew that to lose these manuscripts was to lose their very soul. Knowledge had become fragile, but it was never forgotten. As centuries passed, new threats emerged. Colonial powers marched into Africa with their own agendas, plundering artifacts and rewriting history to fit their narratives. Many dismissed Timbuktu as a legend or exaggerated myth. Few knew that beneath the silence of the desert, tens of thousands of manuscripts still lay hidden, waiting for the world to rediscover them. Fast forward to the 20th and 21st centuries, and the manuscripts of Timbuktu once again faced danger. During conflicts in Mali, including the recent rise of extremist groups in 2012, there were real fears that the manuscripts would be destroyed forever. For extremists, knowledge was dangerous. For colonial powers, it was inconvenient. For both, these manuscripts were a threat. But once again, ordinary Malians rose to the occasion. Librarians, families, and even farmers risked their lives to protect this heritage. In a mission that felt like something out of a film, thousands of manuscripts were secretly smuggled out of Timbuktu. In rice sacks, chests, and donkey carts. Men and women carried them through dangerous territory, hiding them in villages along the Niger River, ensuring their survival against impossible odds. It was one of the greatest acts of cultural resistance in modern history. Just as their ancestors had hidden the manuscripts from Moroccan invaders centuries earlier, today's Malians repeated the same act of defiance to protect the wisdom of their people, no matter the cost. So what exactly do these manuscripts tell us? They reveal that Africa was never isolated from the currents of global thought. Timbuktu's scholars corresponded with thinkers in Cairo, Baghdad, and Andalusia. They engaged in debates on philosophy, law, and ethics that mirrored and at times surpassed those in Europe and Asia. In medicine, they described cataract surgery techniques and remedies using African herbs. In mathematics, they worked with algebraic principles and geometric designs centuries before European textbooks. In astronomy, they charted lunar calendars and planetary motion with astonishing accuracy, aiding navigation across deserts and rivers. These were not primitive musings. They were advanced, precise, and deeply intellectual. Perhaps most importantly, the manuscripts reveal a vision of society built on balance between knowledge and spirituality, science and ethics, community and individuality. They remind us that African civilizations were not only receivers of knowledge, but creators of it, producers of original thought that shaped the world. The story of Timbuktu's manuscripts is not just about old books. It is about identity, survival, and truth. It is about a people who refused to let their wisdom be erased, who protected their legacy with their blood and their lives. These manuscripts are Africa's voice rising from the sands, telling the world, we were always here, we were always brilliant, and we will always endure. So the next time someone tells you Africa has no history, remember Timbuktu. Remember the families who buried their books to save them. Remember the scholars who charted the stars and healed the sick. Remember the wisdom that outlived empires, invaders, and colonizers. Stay with this story, share it, and carry it forward. Because the manuscripts of Timbuktu are not just Africa's treasure. They are humanity's treasure. And they remind us that no matter how many times truth is buried, it will always rise again. Thank you for being part of this story. By liking and sharing, you help ensure Africa's voice is never silenced. Subscribe, and we'll see you in our next powerful chapter.